I realized actually as I was writing the story and first sort of talking about it that a lot of people were actually quite unaware of conversion therapy and what it was or that it was something that was even still happening and that it happened even right here in Canada. And so there was also then the opportunity to sort of present that conversation.
Today on Rainbow Country, award-winning Canadian actor, writer, and director Jonathan Lawrence joins me to talk about his new queer series, Altar Boys.
Hi everyone, this is Mark Tewksbury, Olympic champion, leader, humanitarian. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Let's try this again.
Oh, damn it.
Huh? What are you gonna do? Truth. Truth, eh? Does any of this actually work for you?
Well,
I've never been much of a proponent of the term conversion therapy. I prefer to think of my work as a stratagem of restructuring. I look forward to meeting the young men you will become on the other side of this.
Under the circumstances, I need to investigate the events of the fire and your program here at Cedar Ridge. How did you all end up here?
Where's here? Where even are we, exactly?
I was told that you went back in to get everyone out safely.
Not everyone.
How did you find yourself in this program twice?
Well, I was looking for someone.
Run. Scamp.
I mean, think of where we could go after this. Right? You wanted to see the ocean, right? Pick one.
To myself. The self that I wasn't allowed to see, to share, to love.
You don't have to hide everything in here.
Said that last summer.
Then none of us have changed, I guess.
You know I got you. I never doubted that. But you're gonna need all of us too. Because even though you didn't get kicked out, they're gonna make you wish that you had been.
You do well to catch up on the lesson you missed earlier.
Don't do anything that I wouldn't.
And that leaves me an embarrassing amount of leeway.
Feet to the fire. Now.
Just can't believe how far it's gotten.
You promised we would be okay.
I never asked for any of this.
This is a charade, and you know it.
I have an obligation.
Bullshit, Sonic!
Your father sent along a letter with your application. That man he talks about is still in there. I'm just here to help find him again.
You should probably get your story straight, huh, Scotty? Well, not that straight, obviously.
Jonathan Lawrence. Hi, how
Hello.
are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am well. I am well. Thank you for being here to have your voice, your story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for this, especially to talk about Altar Boys. Altar Boys. This is a 6-episode TV series that's out now, out streaming on CBC Gem. You write, you direct, you co-produce, you star in Altar Boys. Let's start from the ground up. What is the story essentially that you're telling in Altar Boys?
Of course. Well, first, I just want to start by thanking you for having me on today. It's wonderful to be able to chat about the project. Yeah, so I mean, at its core, you know, the story of the series is really, you know, on the surface, it's following a group of young men after they're rescued from a forest fire that tears through this conversion therapy camp that they were attending, and then through that rescue, they're kind of forced to relive the events of the summer. But I mean, really, in that kind of retelling of their story, you know, it's really becomes a tale of like community and friendship and sort of that kind of empowerment of identity, and all of that, of course, in the face of adversity throughout the series here. And it really, for me, was always intended to be also a story of beauty, and I think that comes through really strongly with the project and the crew that sort of put it together. And I think those were the driving forces behind kind of the baseline, the sort of foundation of what we wanted this to be.
So you write this story, and it's based on an award-winning short of yours. What inspired the story that you're telling in Altar Boys? Like, where does this all stem from?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for me, I think when I'm looking at roles, I mean, a lot of it starts for me kind of like as an actor. That's kind of how I started in this industry. And then I kind of eventually kind of moved over to writing and directing and sort of wearing some of the other hats. But at that sort of start of acting and looking at roles that were out there in the world, and especially like queer roles, and just sort of seeing what things that resonated with me. And so it was just like all these things that I kind of didn't see out in the world, I kind of wanted to create and put out into the world. And so with this particular project, it started as a short film, as you've mentioned, back in 2018 we shot, but the sort of spark for the story, kind of didn't lie within the sort of grit of it. It was the sort of chance to show queer relationships specifically, and I wanted to sort of examine different that kind of different array of sort of queer intimacy and queer affection, and the idea of sort of like the platonic love affair that kind of can take us through a story. Not that we don't sort of also examine romantic love, but it was sort of those variations that I felt that were very limited in what I had sort of experienced, that I wanted to kind of flesh out more and sort of put my lens on and then put that out into the world. And so that's really where that began. And then I realized, actually, as I was writing the story and first sort of talking about it, that a lot of people were actually quite unaware of conversion therapy and what it was, or that it was something that was even still happening, and that it happened even right here in Canada. And so there was also then the opportunity to sort of present that conversation and that kind of visibility to this sort of practice kind of in the world. And so it kind of became a bit sort of twofold with that. But I was also able to, funnel my own experiences with adversity, and kind of amalgamate that with this very real world place, and kind of explore all of that in one. And that kind of became the start of the story.
They often say, write what you know.
Mm.
Right?
Yes.
What you know.
Yeah.
Did you experience conversion therapy camp then?
No, I didn't. And so, my experience with conversion therapy sort of began mostly as, reading kind of articles and sort of hearing different sort of, experiences kind of in documentaries and things like that. But what I did know, what I did recognize, and what was my own was, adversity in the context of, bullying, really, going back to, junior high. And when it's in a place where it is so, you know, relentless, and there's just no sort of time away from that, in this sort of pocket of my life, it exists in a way that it creates these feelings of being isolated, of being trapped, of sort of being kind of imprisoned by these sort of, this adversity. And so that was something that I recognized, and that I could kind of amalgamate with, the research that I had done, and create something that was, both informed, sort of from, experiences in the world, but also really from my own kind of lived experience as well.
Okay, so quote, "This is a cult. This is brainwashing. We are not sick. They are." Unquote. Those are some of the words within this series.
Mm-hmm.
This 6-episode series is based on your award-winning short film. During the process of creating the series, was there ever a thought of, or maybe a reworking of it to be a feature-length film?
I mean, maybe like a fleeting one, I suppose. I mean, in truth, the series is what I kind of had first in my mind. The whole idea of the project sort of came to me as a series, because the series sort of allowed for a greater infrastructure of story to really dive in and be able to sort of explore all these things that we really wanted to tell. But I think what happened initially was the short film presented an opportunity for us to start exploring this story and these characters and this language and this world, in a way that was a bit easier to start, like while we were garnering kind of resources
Mm.
to do the feature or to do the series rather. And
So
so that's, yeah.
was the short essentially maybe a proof of concept?
I feel like I don't know that it necessarily intended to be, but I think it ended up standing as a
Mm.
really strong proof of concept for the series in the end. Yes.
Mm. Well done, well done.
Yeah, thank you.
Is it fair to say that Winnipeg, Manitoba is another character in this series?
Of course, 100%, 100%. When we went into this project, I mean, interestingly enough, I mean, we're sort of on the peripheral of the city for the majority of our filming here, but it was always an opportunity to highlight Manitoba in more ways
Mm-hmm.
than one. I mean, Manitoba is such a beautiful backdrop to this story. Our wonderful director of photography, cinematographer Jordan Popovich captures the landscape in such a stunning way, and it was what a wonderful way to sort of highlight Manitoba and showcase the beauty that is here. And then it was also an opportunity to really pull from the sort of boundless sort of arts hub that is Winnipeg, and the artists that are sort of both in front and behind the camera, and highlight Manitoba in that context as well. And I've in the end, I mean, I just feel like Manitoba really shines, and it's such a wonderful ensemble of sort of the character of Manitoba, as you've sort of, or Winnipeg, as you've mentioned. So I would definitely agree with that statement. I think it very much is a character.
And you're based in Manitoba, aren't you? In Winnipeg?
I am, yeah. I'm in Winnipeg right now, yes, and it is very cold. It is very, very cold.
This show airs in Winnipeg on CKUW FM. So
Oh, wonderful. Okay,
there you
excellent.
go.
Great.
The title, Altar Boys. Is there a story behind this particular title?
Kind of. Perhaps not as sort of a kind of long one as some of the others, I suppose. But yeah, I think, even with that sort of knowledge of coming into this project with there where there was a bit of sort of an unawareness kind of around conversion therapy, I think there are some assumptions. And so I wanted to sort of take a title and sort of when I landed on it, I'm just like, felt perfect because I think people are expecting a different spelling of altar. They're expecting Latar. And that sort of changes the context of the show. It's just like there's an expectation, and then there's sort of a change in sort of how we are directing our series and what we're focusing on, and that's kind of I think how that sort of title kind of came to be.
Jonathan Lawrence, did you always want to be in the performing arts? Did you grow up wanting to be on stage, be an actor?
I did. I really did. And I mean, yeah, I really started in this whole industry as an actor. And then before that, I mean, even as a child, sort of in, worlds of fantasy and play, of course, it was always a really interesting place to kind of just dive in and start kind of exploring sort of different headspaces and different characters and all this wonderful stuff. So has really existed for as long as I can remember at this point, which is wonderful. So yeah, I've kind of always kind of lived in this realm of sort of performance. I mean, I guess I started more so kind of in theater. That was a bit more accessible when I was younger, and then eventually that kind of bled over into the world of television and film.
Was there a moment? Was there a flashpoint? Was there a spark that made you go, that's what I want to get into? Was there a film, maybe you saw a film or a play or a musical or something that made you say, there is what I want to be?
There's what I want to be. Well, I mean, if I go back really far and I sort of reference sort of like the kind of like inner child in me, I cannot help but reference Jurassic Park and how many times I've sort of did the raptors in the kitchen scene like in my own house. So that was wonderful. I just feel like to sort of look at a project like that, like a film that was just so transcending this kind of fantastical world of at the time my interest of dinosaurs. I mean, I say at the time I still love dinosaurs, but I mean there was a great spark for I think the larger context of just wonder of what could be created, right? And so that's where the kind of largeness of story and being a part of storytelling, I think, began. And then as I've, consumed more content and experienced more theater and film kind of over my life, it just continue to strengthen that passion and that drive for that direction.
Hmm. So this is a gay radio show. I
Mm.
am gay. We're both part of the LGBT community. For me, it started when I was super young, like maybe 4, 5, 6, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
When I started recognizing that aspect of myself. For you, when did you start becoming aware and conscious of, your same-sex attraction, that sort of thing,
Yeah.
When did that start crystallizing for you?
Oh, goodness. I mean, sort of like in a retrospect kind of way, I kind of look back and think like it probably was fairly early on. I mean, when I'm quite young, I don't necessarily know that I was, sort of thinking about it in the context of sort of sexuality so
Mm-hmm.
much, like
Mm-hmm.
not understanding even what that word probably even meant at a
So
time.
I like being
But
around this boy.
right, yes, exactly. And so you have like these experiences where you're just sort of like, okay, I'm feeling this, but it's you. So
Mm.
you don't necessarily know that that's different from somebody else's experience, right? It's just kind of like, okay, well, this is what I'm feeling. I don't know that everyone else is not feeling the same way? And so at a time, it doesn't necessarily feel um, different. I think there's a kind of an interesting pocket of time where it can actually be this kind of very beautiful thing where you don't necessarily feel different because of it. I think eventually, I mean, in my particular sort of, journey with that, it was sort of made evident to me that it was at a particular point in time, and then it kind of became this thing that, oh yeah, this is not what I'm supposed to be feeling,
Mm.
and that's kind of like what you're being told at that time.
Mm.
But I would say that, yeah, it was definitely pretty young, and then those feelings kind of, they evolve and they emerge, and I mean, there's fluidity in that too, and but yeah, I would agree, similar to yourself. There is that sort of spark at a young age. And then I think it gets built with context and sort of understanding over the years.
As a creative, do you think that the art that you're creating through a queer lens?
Hmm. Yes, 100%. I mean, it seems impossible to remove that lens, from me and my work because
Hmm.
it's it's
From your
it's
lived
myself.
experience.
Yeah, exactly. So like every, moment of sort of nuance in my life is sort of, distilled into what I'm creating in that context. And so yeah, it would be impossible to sort of remove that lens. And but I'm excited to bring that lens to the work, right? To showcase, experiences and things that I recognize and things that I love and that I've seen and that I want to sort of, you know, hand off to the world and showcase like here's this pocket of the world that I've seen or I've kind of built or want to see, and I want to hand that off and hope that it resonates and finds audiences that really can connect with that and sort of draw and extract all the wonderful things that they have from their own lens, right? And so yes, I would agree heavily that it is all coming from a very much a queer lens.
Mm. Who should be telling whose story? Over the last few years, in in media, on social media, there's been a real push for, authenticity. Like, who
Hmm.
should be telling whose story? Should gay people be telling gay stories and maybe straight people be telling straight stories? You are in the creative arts,
Yeah.
and you are creating content for yourself as an actor, as a producer, as a director. How do you see this? How do you come down on who should be playing what role? Should actors just be playing the roles that they are best suited for, or are you specifically looking for a gay actor to play a gay role, or should that role go to the best person that auditioned for it gets it? Where do
Right.
you land on that?
For sure. It's interesting. I've noticed a lot of that conversation kind of evolving even in the last sort of, 5 sort of 7 years. We've kind of seen more expanding conversations in more. I mean, I'm referencing, I guess, a lot of what I'm seeing in terms of actors, kind of specifically in that
Mhm.
sort of realm. And so yeah, I'm always sort of keeping an eye out there and sort of hearing the stories, and they're out there in a way that are so. There's a lot of opinions that are sort of well articulated and on sort of both sides of it. I think, you know, in the context of our project, you know, when we came into it, we really wanted to infuse as much authenticity in that way as we could, both in front and behind the camera, actually. And so that was definitely an important component with us, and we really strove to do what we could in that realm. I think we've seen, you know, very wonderful performances from non-gay actors playing gay roles, of course. And I think, you know, when that reality is what is being worked with, I think, you know, there needs to be that sort of that sensitivity, there needs to be that sort of understanding. And I think when you have actors sort of working in that way to really sort of build that authenticity, that they may not come from in that own the kind of only lived experience. I mean, there's some really interesting ways to, I think, help inform that process. And I think we've seen some really beautiful work, right? So it's sort of hard to kind of discredit some of the wonderful work that has come from that kind of framework. But I do know that, like, yeah, I mean, where that authenticity can be infused, I think there's a lot of magic to be had there. And I think that's a really beautiful, beautiful thing.
Hmm. This this 6 episode series, like I mentioned before, is based on your award-winning short film. When you were going back to the very beginning and creating the short film and creating the series, did you ever receive any pushback from telling this queer story that you are ultimately telling? Did you ever receive any, you know, pushback on telling it?
Honestly, no. I think we were quite fortunate in that regard. I feel like we sort of were able to garner a lot of support behind the project. I mean, the project doesn't sort of get to the state that it's in and being out there and sort of visible and accessible to an audience without that support. And we really were quite welcomed in all the avenues that we sort of approached with this particular project. And I think there was, you know, a lot of value that was seen in what we were doing. I mean, we obviously did, you know, came with the value that we knew we wanted to put into it, but I felt very much aware that our, you know, our partners, our funders and our affiliates and everyone kind of around us was also in that understanding. And so that felt really great. There wasn't a lot of pushback for us, which is wonderful. And I mean, I hope that we continue to see that same push and support for, you know, continued growth in queer content out into the world, because it's so invaluable and it's so needed. There's such a need, you know, beyond the demand. There's just a need for queer content to, you know, sort of expand minds and connect with audiences. And so, yeah, we were very fortunate that we had the support that we did with this project.
And now you have streaming services that are, you know, queer streaming services. Who knew?
Yeah,
Who knew?
exactly. Who knew?
Thank you.
Definitely not when I was like a kid watching there. None of that was around.
You wear many hats: actor, writer, producer, director, and I'm sure I'm leaving out, you know, many others. For yourself, you feel most comfortable doing what? What aspect of the creative arts do you feel most comfortable doing?
Interesting. That is a great question. I mean, for me, in the way that this all these kind of hats kind of came together and how that kind of formed, it was, you know, I don't really look at them as sort of being mutually exclusive. It sort of all falls under this kind of one role of storytelling, right? There's an opportunity to sort of bring a sort of a reference point and perspective as a writer, which is wonderful. And then you have that, you know, further translation of that as a director, and then you can, you know, in its kind of final form, articulate that as an actor. And so it's kind of one journey, you know, for me, because I started really in film, like in this sort of in like kind of the world of cinema kind of industry, kind of doing all of them. It wasn't like a slow kind of progression of kind of adding more hats. I kind of started that way. So that is a strategy that I'm very familiar with that. And yeah, it's interesting, sort of the way. I mean, it might have been a different journey if I kind of was only like, I mean, I started in theater, I guess, as an actor and kind of built that, but it really did start that way. So it kind of feels kind of all one. I mean, I enjoy so many pockets of all of them, right? And which is really wonderful. So it's hard to sort of, you know, break them apart and kind of look at them individually in a way. But I mean, they are nuanced, of course. They are very different roles, and I mean, I guess if I sort of had to break it down, I mean, so much of it is sort of channeled through myself as an actor. Like I write what I want to explore as an actor, and sort of then want to tell as a director, right? So that kind of reference point of sort of sparking a story is usually from like a point of like what headspace do I want to be in? Like what do I want to live? And so in that sense, that could maybe be where I would have the most sort of comfort in a way. But yeah, I mean it's all a storytelling role to me. And so
Hmm.
I hope that answers your question well.
I recently saw an interview with Jamie Lee Curtis,
Yeah,
and
nice.
she was talking about at the age of 60 something, she's now beginning to, or at least over the last few years, has taken the bull by the horns,
Mm.
so to speak, and started creating projects and roles for herself to play at the tender age of 60 plus.
Right.
For yourself, creating altar boys, are you creating the projects and the roles, especially telling queer stories that you want to be part of, that you want to tell, as opposed to, waiting for an agent or someone to send you a script with a role in it?
Right. I mean, yeah, it very much starts kind of from that sort of standpoint. I think, in this industry, it's important not to just be waiting by the phone in a way, right? You sort of got to get out there and create your own opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, from a sort of content standpoint, it is what are roles that I want to see, like what am I not necessarily seeing in sort of queer content that I want to portray or jump in or share, from my own sort of lived experience and everything in that context. So yeah, I do think that that is sort of kind of what is sort of happening with how the roles kind of develop, and what you want to see more of in the world. And it's important to have multiple things kind of on the go as well. But yeah, it definitely stems from a place of um just being able to build opportunities for the collaboration as well that you're working with, because that is so much part of it. I mean, even wearing the sort of multiple hats that I do, I mean, that's really only made possible by the wonderful ensemble of artists that I get to work alongside, right? So it's also kind of infused by community, right? By the arts community, and that and what we all want to tell.
But also to the environment that we're in, with all these platforms that are available that need content.
Mm.
There are more opportunities for people like us, for creatives, to
Yeah.
tell, especially to tell, LGBT stories, whatever they may be.
Oh, for sure. I mean that it's wonderful to see sort of the expansion of just queer content, and I mean the streamers just provide so much access to being able to share that. Like when we came into this, I mean we had so much support from CBC Gem when we did our pitch to them,
Mm.
and that was wonderful. And it allows us to get out there and tell the story, and then they have a platform that allows us to share that story in a very accessible way, because that's really important, right? To sort of reach your audience and find your audience, and sort of build that viewership, if to and hopefully kind of find that resonance with the sort of the viewers that are able to watch it, is that it is accessible. That's so important. And so the streamers do make that such a wonderful component, and CBC Gem is just has been such a wonderful platform to be able to help us get that
Mm.
work out there. And yes, very different from times before, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, great. So invaluable to see that expansion happening in all the ways that it can be.
Best feature film, best first time director, best short. Those are just three of the awards that you have garnered. You are a multi-award winning creative actor, producer, director. What what do those accolades, those awards, what do they mean to you to receive those?
Um, I mean, it's wonderful to have, a recognition for the work, because, all of that, it's all sort of a domino effect. It all builds to help get the next thing off the ground, right? And so that's really important, right? It's so wonderful to receive the recognition for the work and the audiences and sort of like the industry kind of recognition, the recognition from your peers is sort of existing in such a way to sort of help, we can kind of all help elevate the work together kind of in that way. And so that it has been wonderful to see that the projects are gaining traction in that context, recognizing the work of everyone involved because it is such a it's such a collaborative process, right? So we're in it, like we're in the thick of it doing the job and we know what goes into it. And so to then have the award sort of there to recognize that further is just so wonderful. And it really does help to sort of when we look down the road and on the horizon at the next project, all those things really sort of help and sort of we can kind of reflect back on as we are looking to build the next thing. That recognition does help to strengthen our pitch for the next project and sort of to help us keep telling more stories. And so I mean that's so important to us that we can just sort of keep sharing.
Because of the success of Altar Boys, do you feel any sort of anxiety, any sort of pressure, any sort of feeling some kind of way to create something that's going to resonate again? Do you feel any sort of, any kind of way for your next upcoming project because of the success of Altar Boys?
For sure. I mean, I think in the context of anxiety, I just kind of live there most of the time anyways. So I'm always sort of in a little bit of an anxious sort of mode. But I mean, yes, I suppose to a degree. I mean, it's, as a sort of an ensemble kind of coming together to create something, I'm just like it's, there's something in that process as it's happening that like the camaraderie that is there, the rapport and sort of the community that is built in that process, that's going to show up on screen. And in that sense, it's we kind of we know what's there to a degree, right? But it's great to sort of take it off of, it's been in our minds, it's been ours for so long, and then just hand it off to an audience and then just kind of see how it evolves. Anytime that it's out, once it's out in the world, it kind of takes on its own life. And it's interesting to see how that happens, like what forms, from that sort of experience. And I mean, we've been so fortunate enough to have had, a wonderful response to the series, to this first season of the series. And so, I mean, it's not so much a pressure, but there is a drive there. There is an ambition to keep, presenting work that will reach audiences and will sort of connect and resonate and land in hopefully a very positive sort of way. So, but I mean, I think I would look at it more so as a drive to sort of continue than an anxiety sort of specifically. But it is an exciting place. I mean, it's an industry of a lot of question marks, and in terms of what's next. But I think wrapped up in that question mark is all the promise. It's all the possibility as well as just uncertainty. And I think that's an exciting kind of place to be.
Well said. Well said. Here's my last question for you, and it's simply this: what do you hope audiences come away with after they've in this particular case, they've experienced Altar Boys?
Oh, well, I mean, I hope that people take away the beauty from the story that we worked very hard to put into the story. I hope that they see the sort of empowerment of sort of community and chosen family that we examine through this story. I hope they see the richness of queer relationships, of friendships, of romance, of intimacy and affection, and yeah, really are just sort of able to see us really sort of take away sort of like what is, right there is sort of in front of them in the story is sort of that queerness. And I think that's a really wonderful thing, whether, you recognize it or we're there to introduce it to you to sort of start. I think all of that is a very beautiful thing. And, from a sort of project standpoint, I hope people take away all of the wonderful work that this sort of exceptional team of artists have put into this project because they are such a wonderful group of artists that I got to work with. So that I think really sums up what I hope is sort of taken away from the viewing experience of our series.
Well said, well said. Jonathan Lawrence, well said, well done, well made, well produced, well directed, well acted, well written.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for being on the show.
Of course. Thank you very much for having me.
Let's try this again.
Oh, damn it. Huh? What are you gonna do?
Truth. Truth, eh? Does any of this actually work for you?
Well,
I've never been much of a proponent of the term conversion therapy. I prefer to think of my work as a stratagem of restructuring. I look forward to meeting the young men you will become on the other side of this.
Under the circumstances, I need to investigate the events of the fire and your program here at Cedar Ridge. How did you all end up here?
Where's here? Where even are we, exactly?
I was told that you went back in to get everyone out safely.
Not everyone.
How did you find yourself in this program twice?
Well, I was looking for someone.
Front. Scamp.
I think of where we could go after this. Right? You wanted to see the ocean, right? Pick one.
To myself. The self that I wasn't allowed to see, to share, to love.
You don't have to hide everything in here.
You said that last summer.
Then none of us have changed, I guess.
You know I got you.
I never doubted that. But you're gonna need all of us too. Because even though you didn't get kicked out, they're gonna make you wish that you had been.
You do well to catch up on the lesson you missed earlier.
Don't do anything that I wouldn't.
And that leaves me an embarrassing amount of leeway.
Feet to the fire. Now.
Just can't believe how far it's got.
You promised we would be okay.
I never asked for any of this.
This is a charade, and you know it.
I have an obligation.
Bullshit, Sonic!
Your father sent along a letter with your application. That man he talks about is still in there. I'm just here to help find him again.
You should probably get your story straight, huh, Scotty? Well, not that straight, obviously.